fellow Americans.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
Let me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You've indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the President now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the Major's. The Major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the President have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. slightly above your pay grade, to decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I was
you've already
still in
done.
Parliament... There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans, right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. You get NIH, one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among animals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
It did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, It is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
It
no
is
one is alleging that
molecularly.
those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That
you
is
can't
not.
get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible
No one's
to
saying
result
they are. No
in
one's saying those
SARS-CoV-2.
viruses caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were
They're not.
animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And you
won't admit the truth.
And you
Senator
implying.
Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond. Dr.
And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individual. I totally resent
could
that.
have been.
And if
And it
anybody
could
is
have been.
lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, on this Wednesday into Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we like to cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores, and we've got a lot to cover for you on this Wednesday evening edition. The next pandemic is starting now. The World Health Organization, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Bill Gates specifically, saying that we need to prepare because the next pandemic is already underway. And guess what? It's going to be targeting children specifically. And Chicago hospitals are already getting ready. Their children's wards. Like, what in the world is going on? Chelsea Clinton is out talking about getting all of these kids vaccinated in record speed. So we're going to dive into this latest on the WHO.
Plus, on the heels of the Durham report, which shows that there is corruption in the Justice Department, we have more proof of corruption in the Justice Department as investigators who are looking into Hunter Biden's taxes say they've all been fired. We're going to look at that. It's outrageous. You'd think they'd take a beat before showing us some corruption after report of corruption. No. But let's just keep it going.
Also, we're going to look at the move in journalism. All these local newsrooms across the country, what happens is they end up getting on the same page a lot of times. The reason they're getting on the same page is because they've all signed up for a new form of journalism. They have a plan, basically, that all of this crime coverage that we're seeing across the country, we're seeing all of this crime. We have a better plan. Instead of covering the crime coverage, instead of covering the crime, what we're going to do is pretend it doesn't exist. That's basically the new plan for journalism going forward in the United States. That's how to solve America's crime problem. Just pretend that it doesn't exist.
Right. And plus, the Pentagon knew that Fauci's report on the COVID lab leak was BS, and no one ever told us. A new leaked document shows that the lab leak report was viable. The Pentagon knew that, and yet the disinformation powers that be let us be censored around the pandemic. All of that and more as Redacted starts right now.
Welcome in, everyone, on this Wednesday. We've got a very busy day for you, and we are going to get to all of the latest news, including what's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic. Is it officially over? Because we had to get that out of the way. We saw, on our live chat last night, many of you were saying, man, the pandemic's over. Like, let's not even talk about vaccines anymore, any of this. Of course, the fallout from all of that is still being felt, and we're seeing all of the data as it relates to women and pregnancies and all of this stuff, which could be with us for many, many years. But move aside for the COVID pandemic, because the next pandemic is well on the way, and we're going to get into all of that. But we also have a daily newsletter that we want to tell you about. If you go to redacted.inc, you should sign up because it's totally free. We had about 1,000 of you sign up for it yesterday. Again, totally free. It's a great way to start your morning. All you need to do is put in your email address, and then you'll receive a welcome email, and then just verify it so it doesn't go to spam. And then the newsletter, we try to provide you a lot of value. You can kick off your day about 6:30, 7 a.m. Eastern time is when we publish the newsletter, and we cover about 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day. We cover a little things, some things you might have missed in your morning or overnight while you were sleeping, and we try to do it with a little bit of humor. So it's a perfect way to start your day. Redacted.inc, not .com. Put in your email address, and that's how you can kickstart your day with our newsletter. That's the best way to start your day.
With news. That's right. We're going to talk about what constitutes news later in the show today, as mainstream media decides it's more important to be sensitive to your feelings than to tell you about the news. Now, I too care about your feelings. I realize a lot of news we talk about here is triggering, but we break down these stories because we want you to decide how they affect your lives deliberately, not be dragged through the mud.
Yeah.
So here we go. Yesterday, we talked about how the Durham report shows that there is corruption inside the Justice Department as it pertains to how some people get investigated and some people do not. And that is disproportionate to one party over the other. Yeah. Well, now we have more evidence of that happening.
Yeah, so the deep state is actively trying to protect Hunter Biden. This is unmistakable, and President Biden ahead of the next election. If not, then how do you explain how the entire investigative IRS team looking into the Hunter Biden team, the investigation was just removed and shut down from investigating Hunter Biden this week? Like, they've been looking at this for a number of years. The entire investigative team was just canceled, dissolved, pulled off the case. Now, according to reports this morning, an IRS whistleblower says that he and his entire team were removed from an investigation into Hunter Biden after claiming that he had evidence of political interference. And what he is asserting is that someone in the Justice Department was trying to thwart this investigation, stop them from doing their job. They were looking into tax fraud. Now, in many ways, this is kind of like maybe the smallest part of the Hunter Biden story. This is the tax fraud. It's the thing that sends Al Capone to Alcatraz. We got him on taxes.
Maybe, but maybe not, because we've covered many times on this show how, the Hunter Biden laptop had Excel spreadsheets and emails showing 10,000 here, 20,000 here, 10,000 for this club membership, 20,000 from this LLC that was connected to whatever, China, Ukraine. The webs that were weaved were really complicated. Anybody, of course, would think there's no way he's reporting that on his taxes, that he's getting some from here. There's emails that say this from the big guy. Is it a gift tax? Is it under the threshold? These are things that absolutely would be illegal to not report on your taxes. And also, the president knows about it because there are emails between his assistant and copying the president directly, voicemails. There's a lot there. You have to think that was not properly reported because it came across so willy-nilly, like, oh, yes, the president's going to pay your country club bill. Okay, we're going to, send that across. These are things that, of course, it would be complicated to report that kind of movement. Most people don't have that problem.
So what he is asserting is that someone in the Justice Department was trying to thwart an investigation into the president's son, into Hunter Biden. He doesn't mention Hunter Biden by name, but the New York Post says that the congressional sources did confirm this. He also says that he was removed from this case because he'd gone to Congress with evidence of corruption. Here is the letter that his lawyer sent to Congress, and it was in the New York Post, but Twitter user Colin Rugg then typed it out for us. So we're just going to show you what it looks like here. We're not going to read the whole thing, but there's the letter. So the whistleblower's attorneys have informed congressional leaders that the purge was carried out on the orders of the Department of Justice. Any way you slice this, this is obstruction of justice. What else could this be? Obstruction of justice. They are actively investigating the son of the president for tax fraud. This whistleblower comes forward and says they're stonewalling. The Department of Justice is trying to go around this. And we heard from the IRS commissioner just a few weeks ago in testimony in front of the House Oversight Committee, asked by Representative Jason Smith specifically, like, if this whistleblower comes forward, will there be protection? Will this person be protected to carry out his or her job in the justice, in the service of the law? And this is what the head of the IRS said in congressional testimony. Watch.
We received outreach from an IRS whistleblower requesting the committee look into concerns the individual has about allegations of misconduct. So can you commit that there will be no retaliation against that whistleblower?
I can say without any hesitation, there will be no retaliation for anyone making an allegation or a call to a whistleblower hotline.
Yeah.
Now, he may want that to be true. That's possible. And in the letter from the whistleblower's lawyers, it says that the whistleblower was informed that this change was at the request of the Department of Justice.
So above his head somewhere?
Which means he's not saying it came from the IRS commissioner. He's saying it came from the Justice Department, and that it's possible that the head of the IRS had no say in this.
So Jason Smith was asked about this last night, actually. So Jason Smith, that person you saw leading the House Ways and Means Committee, asking the IRS commissioner those questions. So Jason Smith says, well, there's one of two things is happening here. Watch.
For any IRS employee could contact us as the Committee of Jurisdiction for Congressional Oversight, could let us know of anything we need to look at. And we've gotten some whistleblowers. And that's why I asked the IRS commissioner just less than 3 weeks ago if there would be any retaliation for the whistleblowers that's coming forward. And he said, absolutely not. Well, yesterday I received a letter from the counsel of one of the whistleblowers that said that he was removed off of this high-profile case along with other individuals of his team. And it was done by the Justice Department. So we sent him a letter this afternoon. We sent a letter to the IRS commissioner asking us to give us the information. There's only two things. Either he's not telling the truth before sworn testimony before Congress, or two, someone higher up directed him to do this.
What do you think it is? Someone higher up, clearly. I mean, I don't know. Let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. Was it Werfel himself at the IRS that was the one driving this whole narrative? Or was it somebody else? We know, though, that it came from the Justice Department.
Well, I mean, this is something then that needs to be put into a discovery process, because the whistleblower is saying that someone told him, it's out of my hands. It came from above my pay grade. It comes from the Justice Department. So is there a paper trail of this? Who said it, and how do we get that information?
Senator Ron Johnson yesterday asked this question in a committee hearing in the Senate side of things, and in front of the IRS, asking them, we want to know. We just got this letter. Like, what the heck is going on here? Listen to Senator Ron Johnson, who has been trying to get to the bottom of a number of truths in this country. Watch.
The concern we have now, according to this letter, is that entire IRS investigatory team has been pulled off the Hunter Biden case. My question for you, Mr. Thwart, in your time in the IRS, in the investigatory division, the criminal division, was there ever another instance where an entire IRS investigatory team was pulled off a tax case?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So, yeah, I've spent almost 30 years with IRS criminal investigation. I'm not aware of a situation such as that. But again, when I retired from the organization at the end of 2020, I was in charge of about 3,000 people, including 2,100 agents. So I can't say with certainty whether or not that happened.
So again, we have a whistleblower here. He's seeking whistleblower protection. Sounds like the House has granted it. I'm not sure what the Senate is doing. This is the Committee of Jurisdiction. I hope you grant whistleblower protection and cooperate in an interview with this whistleblower, because we need to find out this information, claiming partisanship in the Hunter Biden investigation. And now, the fact that the Justice Department has removed the entire investigatory team off of the case, that just smacks of partisanship and erodes the American people's confidence that the IRS will be fair and impartial and administer justice in the tax code equally.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's worth reminding ourselves of our confidence in the Justice Department right now on the wake of the Durham report, right? And the IRS telling us they need more agents. For what?
Yeah,
actually?
You need, how many agents is it?
87,000.
87,000 and armed agents.
Right.
So, yes, no partisanship here. Do you think they're going to go after political opponents? They also, by the way, they have a history of doing it under the Obama administration. We remember what they did in the Cincinnati field offices, right? They specifically admitted to going after conservative groups. So we know that that's true. That's already happened. Do you think that it's not going to happen again?
Right. And again, we're looking right now at the Justice Department, which just 2 days ago, we got the Durham report telling us that anyone connected in this triangle of Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Barack Obama circle was given special treatment when it came to government investigations, right? The government backed off Democratic investigations and put the gas on Republican ones. So now we know about all of this, fuzzy money movement from Hunter Biden. Clearly, there is something to investigate here. Why are the brakes being put on here? Now, and also it's just funny because you would think that Joe Biden, he knows his son has addiction. It's a tragic thing. He knows that his son takes all kinds of big chunks of money here and there. He knows something. In fact, we know that from the way he was copied on emails. So you would think that he would have the best tax attorneys there to be working with these auditors and be on top of this. You would think that, especially if you're going to make a presidential bid. But there's so much here that just doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, can we just, real quick before we get out of here on this story is, think about it, right? He gets a call from his tax accountant a number of years ago, like 2018 or so, and he finds out, Hunter, you're off by $400,000. You owe an additional $400,000 that you didn't report to the IRS. Okay, does he pay it? No, he doesn't. In fact, it doesn't get paid until years later, and it gets paid by like a lawyer or something. It doesn't get paid by him. A team sends in $2 million. So then, wait a minute, $400,000 was what he didn't pay, and now they're sending a check in for $2 million to cover the missing tax money that he should have paid. Like, and why isn't he sending it? Well, it's just coming from this random person to cover these expenses. That's an additional $1.6 million that are not accounted for.
It just smacks of people who feel like they will never be held accountable so that they can just behave however.
Right.
I mean, Clayton and I, we spend a lot of time studying, our taxation, making sure we're prepared for it, studying tax optimization, making sure that, like in Tom Wheelwright's great book, Tax-Free Wealth, that you're always prepared for an audit. And if it happens, you're like, great, because I have my documents in order, right? And you hope that you don't have one. When auditors come in, you say, okay, come on in. I'm ready to show you what I've done. It's all on the up and up. You don't behave this way. The IRS says that it's not going to comment on the status of this case, even though they have all this new personnel, which probably means they're busy putting the gas on an investigation of a Trump child.
Yeah, I'm sure. Or going after Trump in some other way. Who knows? Let us know your thoughts on this. Is this obstruction of justice? What else would it be? Let us know in the comments below. We've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday. The next pandemic is starting now, according to the World Health Organization, Bill Gates, and a number of mainstream media outlets telling you to look out. And guess what? It's going to be targeting children specifically. Chicago hospitals already getting ready for this pandemic, and the UK news organizations all jumping on board with a major outbreak this week in the United Kingdom. So what in the world is happening? We are getting ready for that. But first,
we'd like to tell you about our friends over at Aura. Now, anyone can find anything on the internet, including your full name, your personal email, your home address, phone numbers, and even your relatives. That's why we're happy to tell you about our friends over at Aura. Aura will identify data brokers that are exposing your information and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. They even opt you out of junk mail and telemarketing lists. You can use our link at aura.com/redacted to try it for 2 weeks for free to see how many data brokers are sharing your information. Also, we have the QR code right there on the screen if you'd like to just take your phone, scan it, and then you will be directed right to the place where you can try it out. Again, it's just great to keep tabs on what's out there about you, keep tabs on who has your information, where it's being sold, and, you be in control of that, because it sure does feel like your information can run away with you quite easily on the internet. So please use our link, aura.com/redacted. Try it 2 weeks for free and see if this works for you. Once again, that's aura.com/redacted.
Yeah, our thanks to them for sponsoring the show. All right, let's get ready because the next pandemic is coming. Last week, the World Health Organization told us that the pandemic is over, but we should get ready for the next one because it's coming. And right on cue, the UK government this morning announced it's testing for a new avian flu outbreak. This is the UK news this morning. Watch.
A little bit of breaking news we can bring you, coming from the UK Health Security Agency, and it regards bird flu. You will recall that there was a real concern about it being passed from wild birds to housed poultry in the UK over the last few months. Those regulations have now eased, but they have been doing testing on those who work in the poultry industry, and they've announced that avian influenza has been detected in 2 people taking part in this government testing programme.
So now let's take all of the chickens all in Europe and burn them. Let's kill all of the chickens. Like, that's going to be the next plan here. That they're going to round up tens of thousands of chickens and cull them.
And also the fact that they're testing for asymptomatic flu, right? So again, we've seen this before where it's like, you might have this, I feel fine. You're not fine. Your body's a weapon. Where has that been used before?
Yeah, I can't recall where that's been used before. So here's The Guardian. Here's the headline of The Guardian. Bird flu could become the next human pandemic and politicians aren't paying attention. Debbie Sridhar says. So, yeah. So, again, The Guardian jumping all over this, just like the UK government jumping all over this. Avian flu detected in 2 individuals taking part in testing programs. So, The Guardian, this is like the thing. That the problem is the next human pandemic, politicians aren't paying attention to it right now because we've been so fatigued. This is the point of the piece. Basically, we're so fatigued with COVID that we're going to get smacked in the face with this next massive pandemic. So we better buckle down and start putting our money and our resources into this. Otherwise, we're going to be in real trouble.
Well, also on the news of just last month, pharmaceutical companies were saying that they are testing the bird flu vaccine on humans just in case. That's what they literally said, just in case. So now we're testing for it in humans. We've got a vaccine at the ready just in case it does something bad to human bodies, even though we have no proof of human-to-human transmission.
So the next pandemic might already be here, according to these clowns, and they're telling us it's going to be worse than before. They're going to tell us that's what they're telling us already, and that it's going to specifically be targeting children. Yes, children's hospitals already getting ready for this. Children's hospitals prepare for next pandemic. Joins a network of pediatric hospitals across the country. They're using what they've learned from COVID to offer better protection next time without prolonged and damaging shutdowns. And this isn't us saying this. This is what we've been hearing for months on this show. We've been warning you on this show for more than a year that Bill Gates and others have been warning that children will be hit the hardest. They've been telling us that in the next pandemic, we've said it countless times here on the show, that the focus will be on children because the way that the vaccines were administered, there was that real slowdown and pushback as it came to children, remember? Mm-hmm. And now we've said it countless times on this show, and it's now enough that it's not enough that the last pandemic they created took years off of children's growth by putting masks on these kids, forcing vaccines on these kids, putting all of these awful remote learning techniques into effect, which were a total disaster. We had the report last week about America's test scores for children. America's test scores are now the lowest in history.
Yeah.
Kids were set back by 2 years of cognitive development thanks to this charade, the socialization, the fear of like talking to other human beings. There's a story this afternoon that shows depression is now at an all-time high. Depression.
Yes. But I want to push back a little bit on that because psychologists know that once you name a disorder, it will automatically have a social contagion. We saw that happen with bulimia. As soon as Princess Di had it, there was an outbreak of bulimia. We see this absolutely with gender dysphoria. We've seen it with anorexia. And so when you tell people there is an outbreak of anxiety and depression, there is a pharmaceutical industry waiting to fix that for you. So I think it's really dangerous to sort of validate these concerns of outbreaks of mental disorders because it has an effect of social contagion and it is leading to the mass pharmaceuticalization, if that's a word, of humans. And I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, it is dangerous. I mean, no one else is really sounding the alarm about this. I know Alex Jones has been one of the only other people sounding the alarm about this. Good for him about drawing awareness about how they're planning to do this. And no media organizations are diving into asking the real questions, the tough questions as to why they're actively getting us ready for this next pandemic. Like, why are they telling us that this is going to happen? And they're giving us specific dates around when this is going to happen. Really? Should that not raise any red flags? So many of these things were talked about and predicted ahead of time from Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci and these leaders who were out in Wyoming telling us that this was all coming. And then a few months later it comes. And why are these people not dragged before prosecutorial bodies and questioned? They knew that this was coming.
Well, you think about the psychological game that this offers you, because most of us believe, if I had the pandemic to go over again, I would push back more, or I would question these narratives, or I wouldn't go along with this. That's how I feel anyway. But if you drag my kids into it and say, but this could be really bad for your children, I don't know that I'm going to then be ready for that. I'm a lot more scared. Like, okay, if you tell me that there's asymptomatic bird flu out there and I might be an asymptomatic carrier, I'm less afraid of that at this point than if I think that it could be bad for my kids. And then I'm like, okay, we're going back into lockdown, right?
Well, yeah. And here's the front page of the Atlantic magazine. This is the next stage of COVID is starting now, they're telling us. The next stage of COVID is starting now. Will it be called COVID? I don't know. Last week, Chelsea Clinton announced her plan to get every child vaccinated and caught up to speed, she says. The timing of this is all amazing, isn't it? When they're warning us that children will be the target of the next pandemic. And here Chelsea Clinton is like launching this program, really wants to work with the World Health Organization to get everybody caught up on any kind of vaccines so that we are prepared for this next pandemic. Listen.
A new effort that we're a part of is the new initiative launched by the World Health Organization last week to try to catch kids up on their routine immunizations. In 2021 alone, more than 25 million kids under the age of 1 missed at least one routine immunization. And so we're working with WHO and the Gates Foundation and others to hopefully have the largest kind of childhood immunization effort ever.
Okay, question. I have a question.
Yes, Natalie, go ahead.
You know, your mother as Secretary of State was involved in destroying the economies in Libya and Syria. Those children don't have access to any vaccines or medicine at all. Do we care about them or screw them?
No, under Syria, under sanctions, they will not still allow to be getting any kind of medicines and all of that. But now I guess...
Okay, screw those kids, but American kids. Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question. Can I go? So when you talk about routine, I love how she just quickly skirted past Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She's like, we're working with the World Health Organization and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And she then talks about the routine immunization schedule, right? So what then sits on this routine immunization schedule? The push, of course, is to put COVID or some these mRNA vaccines on the routine COVID schedule, right? These are the things that are being pushed onto this new round of immunization for children. So, you know, it's amazing, like what will sit, you know, it sounds innocuous, like, oh, we're just going after polio. Are you? Is that what you're really just focused on, is polio? Or is it other things that have now been stuck on side of this immunization schedule that we should be talking about? Yeah, the other stuff. Now, this is the same WHO that announced the COVID pandemic was over just a few days ago. Yes, here's the thing. You have to close down the trial run first. The COVID trial run. How do we do lockdowns? How do we get people in masks? How do we distribute vaccines? Like that was our trial run. You have to close that piece down first, as Bill Gates admits later. We'll play you that, in order to make way for the real pandemic, which is the big one. Listen to Tedros.
It's therefore with great hope that I declare COVID-19 over as a global health emergency. However, that does not mean COVID-19 is over as a global health threat. Last week, COVID-19 claimed life every 3 minutes. And that's just the deaths we know about. As we speak, thousands of people around the world are fighting for their lives in intensive care units.
So they've gotten together with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, along with Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and the World Health Organization, and they recently conducted their next pandemic tabletop exercise in Belgium. We showed you this a little bit ago. It's called the Catastrophic Contagion Event, and this is the video that they put together as part of this event where they're planning this out. They've already been tabletop planning this and getting ready for it. It's called Get Ready. Watch.
Officials in 2 Latin American countries alerted the WHO of several outbreaks of a new infectious disease that's mysteriously appearing across the region. Severe Epidemic Enterovirus Respiratory Syndrome 2025. Over the past 6 weeks alone, there have been 500 confirmed or suspected cases reported. The virus could cause a severe pandemic if early containment and mitigation efforts are not successful.
The pandemic in this type of situation and trend would be a risk for the global health security.
Pandemics are inherently political, financial, and so much broader.
We have not spoken on the leadership in country. And I think that we need to be also very careful. We cannot decide a lot of things without the leaders be involved and agree on that.
There is no substitute
for national leadership.
It's important to support the local response or the national response.
Training those that are in these areas first, enabling them with the tools, protecting them, and if needs be, regional solidarity first.
At this stage, communication is key.
Yeah. So the virus they use in this simulation is called the enterovirus. It has a higher fatality rate than COVID-19. Disproportionately affects children and young people. How convenient.
Doesn't it feel like COVID was just a warm-up?
Yeah.
Like, let's see how these a-holes react to this.
And look, I know that sounds like a conspiracy theory. Go ahead, Phil.
I was going to say, it's almost like they were upset that children didn't really get affected by COVID. And they're like, damn it, we missed our opportunity. You know,
Right.
it's like we really could have landed this, but we missed that one part. Let's do it again.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how it feels, right? And this is the thing that Bill Gates talks about. He just was in an interview where he talked about how, we need to get past part one of this, which is getting rid of the first pandemic, like close that down officially. So we close that narrative down, and then we move on to the second piece. Watch.
Well, we have to do two things at once. We have to bring this epidemic to an end, primarily by getting the vaccine out in large numbers to the entire world. And we have to make sure that we're ready because there will be another pandemic. And there's so many lessons about how we weren't prepared, how we should have handled things differently. And, when that's clearly in our mind, those investments need to be made.
And what his investments specifically is he talking about? Well, number one on his list is surveillance. He wants to spend $1 billion making sure that we have this infrastructure in place on surveillance. So we'd be watching everybody, how these vaccines are distributed, your movements, how it's all of it to be able to watch you. Here he is admitting that number one on this list, and it wouldn't cost as much as climate change legislation, $10 trillion. No, it'd be a lot less expensive. But number one on his list is surveillance for the next pandemic. Watch.
The cost of being ready for the next pandemic is not super large. It's not like climate change where, 10 trillion, 20 trillion, these are big numbers. A global surveillance capability would cost like $1 billion a year. The R&D that we need to do to get magic vaccines and diagnostics and therapeutics, that's less than $100 billion over the next decade. So, if we're rational, yes, the next time we'll catch it early, and it won't go global like it did this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, surveillance is on the World Health Organization's pandemic treaty that they're working to pass in the next few days.
Yeah, so this is all timely, right? In the next few days, they'll vote on this.
Surveillance that would surpass the laws in wherever you live. Just global power.
Global surveillance without the local laws, right? Yeah. So
Right.
it would supersede your nation, your sovereignty, and it would cede power to this global alliance of billionaires.
Yes.
Yeah, these unelected billionaires. So,
well, the other thing that I think about when we kind of talk about this stuff is that, like, when you look historically, like, what is there historical evidence that pandemics have ever gone back to back? That they've been so recently following each other.
Yeah, like we talk about Spanish flu. Spanish flu was like 115 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? And so then we're having another one like within 2 years, 3 years. They tell us in their tabletop exercise 2025. Right?
Also, it gives them the right to define pandemics and also define pandemics in terms of information as well. So not only will we tell you what constitutes a pandemic, so it could be as innocuous as a cold going around, but everyone's got it. We don't like these numbers. This is a pandemic. Our powers kick in. And then also the idea of infodemics is if you're not thinking right about it, that also constitutes a pandemic. Oh, people aren't believing us enough. This is a bad cold.
Yeah.
This is an infodemic. Our powers kick in there too.
And
We've gone over this. We've shown it to you, these documents. This is not my extrapolation of it. I wish it were. I'm not that panicked about it until you see it in black and white. Go ahead.
And they're saying 2025 in this pandemic exercise, but then you have these mainstream media organizations we just showed you saying that it's happening now. Like this next pandemic is starting right now. The Atlantic magazine saying this is the next stage. or already here. And then you have the UK government saying, we're worried about this enterovirus. Like this could be the next major global pandemic as an asymptomatic problem.
Yeah.
So let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. And what I'm really concerned about is the targeting of children in all of this. And we should push back against these leaders and tell them we don't want to be a part of this World Health Organization plan. And we don't want to cede our local and national sovereignty to this unelected body of globalists. Anyway.
Right. Now, in the next segment, we're going to talk about doctors and physicians who were pushing back against the COVID-19 pandemic and were not getting any traction there at all. This is a good lesson for us on how to listen to varied voices for freedom of speech, for those types, for non-censorship communities. So we're going to talk about that in a second, and about how there were doctors willing to push back against Dr. Fauci. We weren't allowed to hear them. But first, we're going to tell you about our Redacted Rebel VIP community. So if you want to support local journalism, if you want to support independent journalism, that's what we are here. We're not run by any big corporation. We don't have CNN funneling billions, with their big donors. We don't have Pfizer funneling money to us and all of that stuff. We are just user supported. So thank you guys so much. If you'd like to support independent journalism, just go over to redacted.inc and then click on the community, become a Redacted Rebel VIP. You can join the Rebel community, become a Redacted Rebel. And for the price of a cup of coffee, like once a month, you can support what you see here on our show and help us keep the lights on. Be able to support the kind of journalism that we're able to do, be able to bring you special reports and, of course, videos early. If you join our community, you'll get access to content that you won't get anywhere else, as well as early access to videos and interviews before anyone else gets to see them. And we're going to be launching some new live streams as well into the Redacted Rebel VIP community. So just kind of Q&A hangouts with the group. Everyone can kind of hang out and we can all grab a cup of coffee or drink and whatever and just sit back and chat. And that is just for our Redacted Rebel VIP community. So again, go to redacted.inc. It's not .com, it's redacted.inc. All right. Well, we're going to talk about the pandemic in a second. For those of you who live in the Northern Hemisphere, I don't know if you're feeling any allergies or anything, but I just want to scratch. I'm so itchy right now.
My eyeballs are like in a constant state of just like gummed over.
Oh my gosh. I want to take steel wool to my face and just like... Anyway,
I'm kind of doing fine.
You're fine.
It's really weird. I don't get this problem. Growing up, my mom in Pennsylvania, in the spring and in the summer, and doing I used to mow lawns for a living. That's what I did. I used to mow like with the landscape team that I was on, and we used to go out and I think we'd mow like between 50 and 60 lawns a day.
Yeah, I couldn't do that.
And it was crazy.
My face would blow up.
And I never had a problem. Yeah, like I was always fine with it. But my mom would be sneezing every morning we woke up. It was a constant sneezing.
Yeah, especially being raised in Northern California where everything's so dry, it feels like your face is twice. So anyway, I'm very itchy today.
Itchy and scratchy.
Yeah. Okay, let me just... okay, that feels so good.
All right.
Hang on. Okay, I'm good. I'm ready.
All right, let's kick it off.
Well, the Pentagon knew that Dr. Fauci was manipulating the lab leak theory, and they knew it as early as 2020. Why then did they let him go on and on about the fact that it wasn't a lab leak, that he absolutely knew for sure it wasn't, and they let social media companies censor us for even wondering about that.
Or questioning it.
Now, this is from a new report, and I want to just sort of bring you up on this report because back in March, a report from the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic released documents that showed that Dr. Fauci and his colleague, we just showed you, Dr. Francis Collins, worked together to keep the COVID came from a lab theory from getting out because they did not want it to be known that the U.S. was doing forbidden things in said lab. We went over this on March 6th, if you want to look back through those details. What they showed is that Fauci and people around him were suppressing any lab leak theory and promoting this journal article that spoke against it. This is something we went over. It's called The Proximal Origins of SARS-CoV-2. It turns out that report we showed you, actually, not yet. That report that we showed you back in March was promoted by Dr. Fauci and his colleagues. And in fact, they were asked to conclude something specific. It turns out, though, that researchers at the Pentagon read that article and said, we don't really buy this. We don't think this is a done deal. And we think that we shouldn't just say COVID didn't come from a lab yet. There's not enough here to draw this conclusively. Here's the report. It comes from the Department of Defense scientists saying, we just don't buy that this Nature Journal article, and we don't think that we should go by it. They say here, we do not advance a particular COVID scenario or take issue with the conclusions, but we consider the evidence they present and find that it does not prove that the virus arose naturally. In fact, the features of SARS-CoV-2 noted by this journal are consistent with another scenario that SARS-CoV-2 was developed in a laboratory by methods that leading coronavirus researchers commonly use to investigate how the virus infects cells and cause disease. So what they're saying is this paper doesn't prove anything. It was written by Commander Jean-Pierre Christian, a Navy doctor working at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and Dr. Robert Cutlip, a research scientist at the Defense Intelligence Agency. It was leaked just this week from a COVID origin search group called Drastic. Now, I'm going to summarize this article because Clayton hates it when I pull academic articles and just show you a bunch of pieces of it. So I will learn from that.
A summary. That's great.
I'm going to give you a summary. So here's what they say. 3 things, 3 main points in this. They say that the Nature study says that the spike protein in COVID-19 couldn't have been made synthetically. The government says that's just an assumption. That's not based on any evidence at all. And they, in fact, present previous studies showing that this could have been made synthetically, something like it has been done before. They make the same argument about something called furin cleavage site. This is the sequence of amino acids. The Fauci-supported paper said humans probably couldn't have done this. The government scientists said, yes, they could have, and here's some evidence of them doing something exactly like that. They also refute the argument that you can't reverse engineer a virus like this. They also show it has been done. And they cite, like, look, we've been doing it here. We've been doing it here. We've been doing it here.
Well, also, we had Sasha Latapova on the show. I interviewed her here on Redacted. And of course, she uncovered these documents that showed that that she obtained that the defense, the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, was actively controlling the COVID-19 program from the very beginning. Everything we were told was political theater. They right down to the FDA vaccine approval process was all theater, that they were controlling the entire process. Now, maybe these scientists who were involved in this particular study didn't have access to the other arm of the building that was actively involved in the emergency use authorization process, the PrEP Act, shielding Big Pharma from liability.
But then why do we have them if we're not going to listen to them? Why are they on government payroll? Why are they researching this if we can't have access to this? Like, hey, let's not call this a done deal because of one journal article a conclusion does not make. Here is the conclusion they came up with. They said the argument that Andreessen et al., that's the Nature Journal article, not that one, the next one, used to support a natural origin scenario for COVID are not based on scientific analysis, but on unwarranted assumptions. Skip to the bottom where I highlighted, it says the critique of this argument does not aim to show that COVID originated in a lab, much less to identify a specific laboratory source or to characterize the goal of research that could have generated the virus. We highlight the features of this of COVID noted by this article are consistent with long-standing and ongoing laboratory experiments. So what they're saying is, we've been doing this all along. Here is proof of that. So we have been engineering viruses like this. We have been making synthetic spike proteins like this. We have been doing this furin sequence. We have been all along. So couldn't have happened. Makes no sense. That's only hypothesis.
We have 46 biolabs in Ukraine that are run partially by the Department of Defense, like where we've been doing gain of function research and doing all of this stuff. So of course this has been happening. Like now, the fact that this was natural from the beginning was laughable.
Let me just remind you about this Nature study, which was used to shut down conversation about COVID could have come from a lab. This was the main study that the government used to shut down the lab leak theory and censor people who even uttered it. Worse, the Senate report showed that both Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins had been given the chance to see drafts of this paper and changed it according to what they wanted. They also did this with their friend Dr. Jeremy Farrar, who is now conveniently chief scientist at the World Health Organization.
World Economic Forum, right? World Health Organization. Sorry.
This is him at the World Economic Forum.
So he just hangs out at the WEF, but he's also a member of the WHO.
Well, since the paper was published, he got this cushy new job position at the WHO. Now, here is some edits that this guy, Dr. Farrar, made to the Nature article that we're talking about here. He says, can we change this conclusion? He calls it a micromanage or a micro edit. Can I just micromanage by changing your whole conclusion? Instead of saying it's unlikely that COVID came from a lab, let's say it's improbable. Let me just, I haven't seen your data. I'm just reading through this draft. Haven't done the work myself, but I would like this conclusion as foregone.
Unbelievable. I love how he puts sorry to micromanage, but just want to change this one little word.
Thing. Can I change the whole conclusion? These were from the Senate documents that were released.
And when will these guys be prosecuted? That's the real question I have. Go ahead, Philip.
This is not how scientific papers work.
No.
It's not done by committee. Just like random people get to shove their edits in here. Like, this is not how science works.
This is not a micro edit. This is your conclusion.
Yeah.
I want to change the conclusion to shut it down completely. Now, I would like to remind you that from this Senate committee hearing, what Dr. Marty McCary said about this COVID lab leak probability.
Thank you, Congresswoman. The reason this is even an issue is that it's embarrassing we funded the lab. If we had not funded the lab, 100% of Americans would say this is obvious, this is a no-brainer. The epicenter of the world is 5 miles from one of the only high-level virology labs in China. The doctors initially were arrested and forced to sign non-disclosure gag documents. The lab reports have been destroyed. They've not been turned over. The sequences reported from the lab to the NIH database were deleted by a request from Chinese scientists that called over early on and said, delete those sequences we put in the database. And 2 leading virologists, maybe the 2 top virologists in the United States, Dr. Michael Farzan from Scripps and Dr. Robert Gary from Tulane, told Dr. Fauci on his emergency call in January of 2020, when he was scrambling soon after learning that the NIH was funding the lab, they both said that it was likely from the lab. Both scientists changed their tunes days later in the media, and then both scientists received $9 million subsequent in funding from the NIH. It's a no-brainer that it came from the lab. I mean, at this point, it's impossible to acquire any more information, and if you did, it would only be affirmative.
It's impossible to acquire more information. This evidence is like a literally pile. This pile of evidence here. We can't even, if you want to just add some more evidence to the top of it, go right ahead. But it's already in the affirmative.
This is crazy, right?
If only we had some kind of process of obtaining new evidence on things, like, I don't know, like a way to maybe study it or something like that. Maybe some of these scientists can think of a way to do that.
You're being ridiculous. You're being ridiculous.
All right. Now, in the past couple of days, I've noticed these comments when we're talking about COVID. Like, people are saying, oh, the pandemic's over. Why do we care? Well, we care for the point we just made in the previous segment about how it will affect us when they try to call the next pandemic. But also, I want to remind you that this junk science was used to shut down discourse on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, and in the media. Look at these headlines. Let me take you back to what we've been through. Senator Tom Cotton was called fringe for saying this about the COVID lab leak. Next up, let's see. Tucker Carlson was talking about this debunked conspiracy theory. Well, debunked by who?
PolitiFact.
By this totally crap Nature study that we just talked about that Fauci had the opportunity to edit. Here's another one. New York Times COVID reporter deletes claim about lab leak theory because it was racist. Remember that? If you said the lab leak, you were anti-Chinese.
Right.
So again, this stuff we have to remember so that we can call it out.
Trump was vilified for calling, and he was like, why do you call it the China virus? And he said, I call it the China virus because it came from China. That's what he said. It came from China. Yeah, but isn't that racist? No, it's not racist.
No, because it was our money.
We call it the Spanish flu because it came from Spain. You can run down the laundry list of afflictions that we call things because they come from a certain spot.
Yes.
So you're like, okay, that's what he's calling it, and that's racist, I guess. All right.
And here's another relevant question. I just would like to leave you with this. If the Pentagon doctors knew that the lab leak theory was viable, why didn't those disinformation experts they've got step up and protect us?
Yes.
I'm curious when that's going to happen.
Yeah. When will the Disinformation Governance Board step in to protect us from all this disinformation?
And say, oh, you know what? Our scientists actually say something against what Dr. Fauci is saying.
Yeah.
So how about, we shut down the discourse around shutting down the discourse?
Well, I mean, it just goes to show that the people that are really interested in protecting are themselves. They want to protect their own asses. And then if there's room after that, then they'll maybe get to us.
Right.
But it's basically their asses first and then maybe ours.
All right. Well, let us know what you think of that in the chat below.
Well, and I think it's important when I saw one or two comments yesterday on our show saying, who cares about COVID? It's over. It's like, well, no. What are you saying exactly? Are you saying that the lies, when maybe the greatest crime in world history that they perpetrated on us was carried out, that we should just sweep that under the rug and let these people get away with it? Because we're not. And they're planning actively to do it again. Yeah. So when we can see all of these things in the works right now, we should be able to put a stop to it because now we're wise to it, right? It's fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right?
Right.
And so now that's what we're in that second phase
we
right
must
now.
not be primed for the second fooling.
Exactly. So don't get fooled again, as the WHO would tell you. We've got more news to get to here on the show. If you want to get rid of crime in the United States, there's one way to do it if you're local news stations. And this is the way that the woke media is looking to do it, which is to pretend that crime doesn't exist. So that's the best way to approach getting rid of crime in the United States. Just don't report on it. We're going to tell you about that story. Also, Senator John Fetterman is back, and he gave an amazing speech yesterday questioning. He had to lead a Senate hearing yesterday, and the questions that he asked about the banking crisis, which is arguably one of the biggest crises that we're facing in the United States, the collapse of the banking system. He asked some very incisive, very on-point questions that led a lot of people totally speechless, unable to even respond. We'll get to that. But first, we've got a Redacted store. If you'd like to support us here and pick up some Redacted merch, you can do that by going over to our redactedstore.com, get your Redacted merch, and help support independent journalism. We keep the prices basically just a little bit above cost, just to cover the printing costs and so forth. But a little bit of just a little bit there helps our show and keeps the lights on. But you can support your favorite show and grab a hat, grab a mug, grab a hoodie. They're super comfortable. My kids stole my water bottle, but see that gray hat at the bottom of the screen there. That's the one that I wear every day when I'm walking the dog. So really comfortable. I know, Philip, you said your daughter stole your Redacted hoodie. You got it? She already took it?
I stole it back. I stole it back because it's getting warm out, and it's still a little chilly sometimes, and it's like a lightweight hoodie. And I was like, no, I'm taking that back because that's all I got.
It's mine. But she's like, no, this is super comfortable. I want it, Dad. Anyway, go to redactedstore.com, grab your merch, get it today. All right, let's talk about independent journalism, which is what we are, compared to the corporate media and the local news stations that are sort of all jumped together as one big mega conglomerate led in many ways by the Associated Press, which sort of feeds information to these local news stations. So cities across America are seeing a wave of violent crime that has, of course, forced many large retailers to shut down. You keep hearing the stories, right? REI is shutting down in Portland because of crime. Starbucks is shutting stores because of crime.
Walgreens,
Whole Foods are shutting down because of crime. And big stores are saying enough is enough because the big cities have so much crime in it. Even the Seattle Mail. This was today, right? Or yesterday, overnight. Seattle stops mail for certain zip codes where postal theft is rampant because all these postal employees are being mugged. Hey, give me the packages. And so they're like, this is untenable. Like, how could we even deliver mail anymore? Because the crime is so high right now.
What do you do then? You just have to get a P.O. box?
Yeah, I guess you just get a P.O. box, or maybe no. This is probably all part of the plan. They'll use the Amazon drones to just drop it at your doorstep, so we don't need postal employees anymore.
That doesn't solve the problem of package theft.
But I guess if you could be out there with drones, like with a baseball bat, and here comes the drone with a package, and you just like bat it out of the sky.
Also not a tenable solution.
Know. So, well, the media though has a solution. How do you fix this crime problem? Here's the solution. We're just going to lie to you about what's happening. And we'll try to frame all of this crime in a more favorable light on your nightly newscasts. So if you live in West Virginia and you flip on WVVA television, maybe your local news station is now going to be part of this new movement to lie to you about the news and about what's actually happening with crime. And I'm not saying they're on the list. I'm just using that as an example because I used to work there in West Virginia. That's one news station that came to mind.
Okay. Well, what they're calling this is public safety journalism, as if the journalism we haven't had up till now is keeping you unsafe.
Yeah. So 27 newsrooms across the country have now signed on for this new kind of journalism to change this narrative about the crime. So what exactly is this? Public
safety journalism is essentially when the media is training itself on how to report on news for the social good, which is interesting for especially those of us who've studied media theory. Is the journalism to change the world, or is it to inform citizens about the world so that they can change the world themselves? That is my theory, is not that my job is to reorder society or tell you how to think. My job as a journalist is to give you everything that we find, especially the things that are being hidden, so you decide how you vote, how you behave, how you protect your family. Apparently, that is not the public ethos in journalism. Now, journalists really feel like they are, what's the word where you wear a codpiece? Superhero.
Oh yeah,
like
they're omnipotent. Like they are the ones Anderson Cooper of the world. Like they feel like that they are here to save us. The Don Lemons of the world. Like they're the ones who are really here to tell you how to think.
Right. They're going to save you from yourself, basically. So, now, here is the initiative from the Poynter Institute. This is to train mainstream media outlets on what they call purpose-driven journalism. The purpose is to identify the journalistic purpose behind stories about individual crimes, as well as stories about cops, courts, and public safety. Only then, they say, can they analyze and possibly change that purpose, as if they've got one agenda. I don't like the word purpose at all in journalism. It's as if like we have an agenda to frame the world as such. What they're hinting at here is fairly obvious. They're asking, are they over-covering one group of race of people? Basically, are they leaving things out on purpose? Well, here are some relevant questions. Does the media make it seem like violent crime is on the rise? And do they need to take responsibility for that? Well, according to the FBI, violent crime is on the rise. Take a look at statistics we have. The FBI has only released data through 2021. Yes, that looks like it's on the rise. That's an undesirable society. Is it the media's fault for covering that or not covering that? That's something you should ask yourself. Does the media make it seem like one race is responsible for crimes more? Well, according to the FBI, that also is true. Violent crimes, are committed about equally by blacks and whites. Violent crimes people are victims of violent crimes, more so white, but a lot Black as well. Consider that the African-American population in the United States is about 14 to 15%. They are disproportionately victims. They are also disproportionately perpetrators. Both things are true according to the FBI. If we're just laying out the data that the FBI is showing us, right? Now, does it make the media make it seem like one gender is responsible for more crime? Well, yes, because the FBI is reporting biological gender. That may stop soon, but at this moment, you are equally likely, if you are of either sex, to be a victim. You are much more likely to be a perpetrator if you are a male. You can see that males create more than 3/4 of crimes.
So I just want to go through. So the Poynter Institute, right, got so far 27 of these newsrooms to join on with this crime reporting. So I just want to show you on your screen here. Maybe you live in one of these cities, so you'll recognize this is from the Poynter Institute. These newsrooms represent some of the largest media markets in the United States, as well as some of the smallest. Here, ABC News, Philadelphia. The Associated Press is signed on for this. Your state-funded Associated Press. So if you see an AP news article about crime, they're going to be part of this process now. Anchorage, Baltimore, CBS Detroit. You can see these different cities all across the country here. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Philadelphia, Minneapolis, Detroit.
So what they're saying is not that we think our news coverage should reflect the real world. They're saying we think our news coverage should not hurt one group's feelings. We need to think about how we choose to cover them or not cover them and make sure that it's sensitive. Is it sensitive? Does it help minority communities to downplay the role that violent crime might play in their neighborhood? I mean, let's just play this out, right? They have a choice here between covering a robbery or a violent crime. One perpetrator is black, one perpetrator is white, and they're saying we should give them equal opportunity. But if you think about the victims as well, black victims are not being represented here either.
Right.
And does it serve somebody to paint your neighborhood as if there is not crime if you live there and you are a victim of crime, if you are living in these terrorized neighborhoods?
It's ignoring what's actually happening.
No, we're choosing to be sensitive to the perpetrators and not the victims.
Right, which is exactly what we saw in that shooting at the Christian school with the trans shooter. Right? Why do we not have a manifesto? Why is the media not asking tough questions about this person and the manifesto that was written? Like, why is that being kept under wraps?
Why is it not censored on social media to call her a hero?
Right.
When a lot of transgender people have.
Yeah.
Right? Those kind of things. Yes, absolutely.
Well, can I chime in real quick? The danger of, like, when you look at all those news organizations that signed up, the AP being signed up for that basically covers the majority of news outlets out there, because the AP is often like the source for other news agencies.
Oh yeah,
so like
for
that
sure.
Right there, that's like poisoning the well.
So what you'll notice is, you may notice if you pick up your local newspaper, not your big newspapers, but if you pick up your local newspaper, what you'll notice is, if you look at very closely at the byline of the article that you're reading, very often it's from the Associated Press. It's not even from your local Racine, Wisconsin newspaper. It's just literally reprinted from the Associated Press. So to Philip's point, the Associated Press blasts this stuff out all over the place, and if they're involved in it, then you almost don't even need all these little small news stations, because they're going to regurgitate what the Associated Press says anyway.
Right. And, again, if the media is not reflecting your daily life, if you're living in one of these terrorized and drug-infested communities, it doesn't make you feel good that the media is trying to sort of ignore the crimes that you are living in. And it doesn't, nobody needs the media as a vigilante. Right. We absolutely do not. That's not the role of the media. The media is only supposed to be an ombudsman to, speak the truth of social living.
Yeah. Here are the facts. The stuff that we cover on this show, a lot of it has been redacted. That's the name of our show. It's being kept from you. And so when we present it to you, you can take and do with it what you want.
We presented a study recently of journalistic newsrooms where they asked editors, and they said, well, we think that, what was it? Neutrality, being neutral or being unbiased is a racist tenet, and we just don't aim for it anymore.
Yeah. Being neutral is bias. Being neutral is racist.
Being neutral is racist and paternalistic. And so we don't aim for it. I mean, no wonder that trust in the media is eroding because of this utter crap.
Yeah.
As someone who studied media theory at length, I have a master's in sociology with an emphasis in mass media. This makes me fall apart and melt. It just melts my heart to think about how the media has become so full of itself that it needs to lead social change instead of just inform and trust the public.
That's why we need more independent journalists, like what we feature. We try to feature a lot of independent journalists here on Redacted, people who have their own Substack or are worked for your independent media organizations, those that maybe worked in the mainstream media and got fed up with it and wanted to be out there, as a neutral voice, but being able to bring stories to light. So that's That's why it's so important to support independent journalism. We thank you for subscribing to our show and being a part of our community here.
Like Chris Ellis, who just did. If you subscribe, your name comes up on the board. And make sure you hit that like button or whatever thumbs up props are on the platform that you are watching. It helps us find other people who might want to become a part of our community.
Yeah, that's right. When you actually hit that like button, it pushes us further out into the algorithm. That's how it works on a live stream. So if you would be so kind as to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, that would be great. Well, the greatest threat to the American economy could very well be the collapse of the small and the regional banks. And we guys are in a financial crisis of historic proportions. Even though the mainstream media is ignoring this part of the story, they won't call it a financial crisis, but we are absolutely in a financial crisis. So it's good, finally, that the United States Senate is holding hearings on this banking crisis, looking at these small banks, the large banks that we're bailing out. And thank God we're getting to the bottom of it with tough questions. So Pennsylvania's newest senator, Senator John Fetterman, is back. He's back and he's better than ever. And he's asking the tough kind of questions that we need right now in this biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression. Watch.
Is it staggering? Is it a staggering responsibility that that the head of a bank could literally crash our economy? It's astonishing. That's like if you have, I mean, like, and they also realize is that now they have a guaranteed way to be saved by how, you know. So it's you know, isn't it appropriate that this kind of control should be more stricter to prevent this kind of thing from going? Or should we just go on and start bailing and sailing whoever bank, regardless of how their conduct is? You know, I'll give you an example. The Republicans want to give a work requirement for SNAP. You know, for a hungry family has to have this kind of penalties, or there's some kinds of working required. Shouldn't you have a working requirement after we sail your bank with billions of your bank? Because they seem to be more preoccupied than SNAP and requirements for works for hungry people, but not about protecting the taxpayers, you know, that will bail no matter whatever does about a bank to crash it. Sure.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason no one was responding to that, is because they weren't actual questions.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the question was, but Newsweek, look, this is how the mainstream media tried to spin this. Here's Newsweek's take on this. John Fetterman's question at Senate hearing leaves witnesses speechless. Oh, they were speechless because it was so good? No, they were speechless because there was no question and they didn't understand what the hell you were asking them.
I mean, can we put that screen up again? The senator's appearance drew praise. You know, this is not equal opportunity coverage. We just spoke about media coverage. Now, we're not here to make fun. It absolutely is not fun to watch someone who's struggling.
No, it's painful and awful.
Who should be recovering, who should be, you know.
Should not be a United States senator.
Right, who doesn't clearly have the energy, I want to say.
Or mental capacity.
To be representing an entire state.
Yes.
And, you know.
One of the most important states in the nation, the Keystone State, by the way.
We saw Dianne Feinstein show up last week for Congress in a wheelchair, barely able to put sentences together, right? We're not standing for competency. Now, this kind of headline here where they say the senator drew praise and criticism, focusing on his questions to Silicon Valley Bank, is interesting because we weathered so much coverage about how Trump could not put together a declarative sentence. He rambled on and on. He never spoke in sentences that ended in periods. And the mainstream media was free to take below the belt jabs at him, right?
Right.
For mental capacity. But when we have somebody here who's struggling in a real way due to a real medical condition, who is it serving at this point?
And this brings up a larger question, of course, about cognition and cognition tests for, you know, the people that lead our country.
Well, tests are racist, Clayton.
Oh, that's right. So it'd be racist to ask members of Congress to pass some sort of a cognitive test before they're in service to us. Or the president of the United States, who literally, I mean, yesterday in the White House had a chef there to honor like Israeli food or something, and got the name of the person wrong and kind of yelled at the guy. It was really awkward, and people in the room were like, "What? You just invited this like Michelin star chef here, and you called him Michelle? His name's Michael." And it was a total disaster, and wanders around on stage and can't put any sentences together. No wonder the Democrats don't want to have Joe Biden in any kind of debates.
Yeah.
And yet voters do. That was a surprise at that MSNBC town hall the other day, where the voters were like, yeah, we want to see Biden debate. And they're like, really? You want to see him debate? Well, we can't really bring him out for those types of events where he actually has to talk to other people and interact with other people because he's brain dead.
But how do you propose that something like this would be enforced? I mean, obviously, Dianne Feinstein, voters keep voting for her. They think she's capable. She's the oldest sitting senator ever. John Fetterman, though, was just elected just a few months ago. So voters are not going to have a chance to ring in on his performance for another 2 years. And in the meantime, what? Right?
Well, that's the question. Is there like a cognitive removal process for members of Congress? Go ahead, Philip.
I was going to say that's the problem that we run into, because like the idea that voters could vote out Dianne Feinstein, the party won't let us because they won't put anybody else up.
Same with Joe Biden.
You're basically exactly you're giving people the option of like vote for this person we put in there, or vote for the opposite of your party. And that's the only option we have.
Well, the other option is the 25th Amendment, right? Which is that if, the vice president of the United States, under the procedures of the 25th Amendment, could be then so you could literally transfer power to the vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris, in this situation, right?
Which trended regularly on Twitter during the Trump administration.
Yeah, give it to Pence, people were saying.
All the time.
CNN did whole segments about the 25th Amendment.
And you have to think either it's suppressed or people have not thought of the fact that Joe Biden is like a dying plant that needs water all of the time, right?
Right.
And so, how can this person be representing an entire nation, a global superpower, and not be able to string together a declarative sentence?
Well, it is amazing, because if a member of Congress becomes incapacitated, there is no legal avenue at all to replace that person. Here's a piece from the Bipartisan Policy Institute. Recently, many in Congress have been trying to deal with the issue of members unable to come to Congress due to either sickness or quarantine, or because hygiene recommendations or logistical issues. Anyway, a separate issue, however, is that what to do if a member is so sick or severely incapacitated they could not perform the duties of that job. Well, congressional history is filled with examples of this. Debilitating illnesses. Senator Carl Mundt of North Dakota suffered a stroke, was absent from the Senate for the final 3 years of his term. Illness forced Senator Carter Glass of Virginia to be absent from the Senate for nearly 2 years. And then citizens of Virginia petitioned courts to remove Glass from a seat because it was basically vacant, and the court refused to take action on it. Never has a sitting member of Congress been removed from office due to incapacitation.
That's like tenure.
That's unbelievable.
It's like academic tenure.
What would we say about a Supreme Court justice with the same mental acuity? Wouldn't we call for, think about that, right? If you literally have 9 justices that could decide the fate of the fate of the United States, and one of them has had a stroke and is at home for 3 years and is not on the Supreme Court.
I wouldn't like it. I don't know what I would say.
Maybe Congress should put something in place on this. Maybe there should be a move on this.
They're not going to, because it is against their own interests.
Right. Yeah, and you stay in office till you're 95 years old and you can't speak.
It's like academics speaking out against tenure. Once you got it, you're there. You don't have to work very hard. So why are they motivated to change it?
It's unbelievable.
They absolutely are not. It's up to us, though, as voters, to say, I'm sorry, but you're not of sound mind to do this important job.
Yeah. And Congress is not going to put a vote on something like this because they'd be picking on their own party. This is not going to happen. Let us know, though, is there a way around this? Should Congress put a law in place to remove incapacitated individuals? And what would be the threshold? How can you say that this person is incapacitated? What is the threshold for that? They're in a vegetative state? What if they're in a vegetative state? The only way that it ends up working is if they're dead. That's the only thing that ends up working. But if they're in a vegetative state...
Even then, I can imagine a Weekend at Bernie's scenario with the way that our Congress is.
Well, we already have it.
Yeah.
Weekend at Biden's. We already have it. I mean, literally, President Biden is Weekend at Bernie's.
We were talking recently if we thought our kids would understand that movie. Now it's like...
If they see President Biden, they're like, they don't even need to see the movie. We have a president of the United States that's being carted around as a dead guy. Anyway, let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Well, that's going to do it for Redacted on this Wednesday. Thank you guys so much for subscribing. John just became a subscriber. Welcome to the Rebellion, John. Good to see you. Thank you so much for becoming a member of our great community here. Again, we have our daily newsletter that we would love for you to subscribe to. If you just go to our website, redacted.inc, and put in your email address, you can sign up. We should also make sure you guys understand, we'll do it as a public service announcement here, because the other day someone said on Facebook, they were on Facebook and they went to our store on Facebook. We do not have a store on Facebook.
Nope.
And then they went there and they bought something. They said they bought like stickers or something, or I don't know. They bought a mug from this fake Redacted store.
It looked like because the things that they bought were duplicates of the things that we do in fact sell on our Redacted store. So we do not sell on Facebook. We don't ask you for money. There's some people impersonating us for crypto courses. We don't have a crypto course. The only way we communicate with you is through redacted.inc. If we ever ask you for money in any other channels, that's just not us.
It's not us.
All we ask you for is your subscription to our newsletter, your patronage of our show. If you would like to buy official merchandising, it's at redactedstore.com.
Yeah, so navigate yourself there first. Go to the website. Don't go to like some Facebook group that's trying to scam people. It's really ridiculous. And there's like a YouTube channel that steals our content and like, has stolen like all like tons of our content, uses our name and all of this stuff. So anyway,
and for some reason it always associates us with SpaceX or Elon Musk as well.
Yeah, that's strange.
With Elon Musk.
They do these live streams where they use our name and they put it up to Elon Musk. It's crazy. And they try to sell crypto. Anyway, just come to our website. That's the best place. Or just come right to youtube.com/redacted news or rumble.com/redacted. And that's us. That's the official accounts. Those are our official websites and official streaming platforms. So thanks, everyone. I just wanted to say that so no one gets ripped off or scammed by these hucksters out there. Much love to all of you. Have a great Wednesday night, and we'll be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great night, everyone.